My father-in-law has asparagus down there. It is 70 years old. I walk down there and I just pick it out of the crown and eat it right out of the ground. This is where I started, right here. And I'm getting ready to retire, and I never gardened before, so I said, well, what do I got to do? That's where I started. I was going to till, but then I got kind of tracked into lasagna gardening. So this has started off to be a lasagna garden. So you put a layer of, say, newspaper or cardboard on the ground, then you put a layer of grass on that, then you put a layer of leaves on that if you have them, just kind of layering over time. So lasagna gardening is you just put new layers of stuff on it every year, and it builds the soil over time through breaking down and feeding the plants and whatever you have in there. These are fig bushes right here. Now, I took these cuttings out of my father-in-law's garden. They're like 70 years old. I was pruning them. Well, I just threw the cuttings in here as compost. Before I knew it, I had a fig tree, this big fig tree growing in my lasagna garden. So I just let it go. I said, okay, I got a big fig tree. And I didn't even try, it just kind of happened. Kind of stumbled onto a new technique on YouTube. It's called Back to Eden Gardening with Paul Getchie in Washington State. And I got on that and I just couldn't stop. I watched every one of his videos and I said, this is what I got to do. I put a foot of wood chips on the ground 2 years ago over all this brown area. Well, last summer, you can see in the low spots, all that stuff composted down, a foot of wood chips, and now I'm backfilling it with a layer of leaves, mulched leaves and grass. Live, living soil. You don't ever till it. I don't have to water it. I don't use chemicals. I don't use fertilizers. The ground stays covered with a covering of wood chips, leaves, grass, whatever I have available to me at the time. So I planted some tomato plants right here by this apple tree. I planted this apple tree 2 years ago, and it's really taken off. The limbs will tend to bend down to the ground. And then you just walk up to the tree and pick your fruit instead of it getting real tall. So their roots grow out and they communicate with each other and they build healthy soil, producing a living soil. I don't do nothing to it, and it grows like crazy. I just come out and cut limbs and put it in my smoothie and drink it. I didn't plant this banana tree to get bananas. I planted this banana tree because it's mycorrhizal. It's endomycorrhizal, which means when you want to produce a living soil, you need a root, a living root in the ground. Well, the apple trees are a living root, and the banana tree is a living root. What does that do? A living root produces a healthy soil by bringing in sunlight, liquid carbon, and all the attributes of nature through the leaves down into the soil. It feeds the fungus and the microorganisms that live down there, which they all work together to produce a healthy soil, living soil. If you got to a forest and you pull back the leaves and the limbs, the ground is wet. And it's porous. It's nature. It's the way God created nature to sustain itself. The forest sustains itself with no input from man. From the leaves falling, the branches falling, the ground being covered. Now these asparagus plants I planted in the last spring. Normally if you plant it by seed, you have to wait 3 or 4 years. If you look at this one asparagus here, you can see it's turning to seed and it's got little seeds on it. Those seeds will turn red, but once those die down, then I'm just going to cover them up with newspaper, wet newspaper, and put leaves all around it. And then in the spring, new fresh asparagus is going to come up. There's 5% of plants that are not mycorrhizal in nature of any way, but they benefit from the other plants that are in a healthy, nutrient-rich soil. That's red cabbage, that's curly kale, and that's chard. Take a leaf off of them. I'll put it in my smoothie, or I just eat it. Excellent. I had more tomatoes and I gave away tomatoes, bowls of them, that were healthy, nutrient-rich, beautiful tomatoes. God created, plants to be eaten like animals eat it, fresh, right out of the ground, not cooked, not stuck in the refrigerator. The first plant, after all winter of nothing growing in the garden, and then all of a sudden, boom, asparagus, kale, tomatoes, apples, all of it. I want to be eating out of my garden, out of our garden, and I want to be sharing and spreading the good news of what God has enabled me to see. That's where I want to be in 5 years. According to Paul, it takes 7 years for your body to reconstruct itself. If you start eating healthy food, nutrient-rich out of your garden, and you start eating healthy eggs and healthy products, in 7 years, your body will be reformed into a new cell of living energy. That's my vision, and I see it. No chemicals, no sprays, and it's amazing, nutrient-rich, water-soluble food that is just amazing. That's what I'm wanting.
Come on.